Hey everyone, welcome back. You know we love to get into the nitty-gritty of economics here, and today is no exception. We're taking a deep dive into the UK economy, especially all this talk about productivity as the big solution.
Yeah, it's a hot topic for sure.
It really is. So we've got Shadow Chancellor Jeremy Hunt making some pretty bold claims about how to fix the UK's finances. He's put productivity at the forefront, even more so than the prospect of tax hikes.
Interesting.
Right. And, everyone's bracing themselves for tax increases, but Hunt's saying, hold on a second, increasing productivity is the key. Like, even more important than those difficult decisions he keeps talking about, the ones about our taxes.
I see. So he's basically trying to flip the script on how we approach the UK's economic challenges. Instead of going straight to tax increases, he wants to focus on making the economy more productive first.
Exactly. And he's not just pulling this out of thin air. He's got some pretty compelling stats to back it up.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
Uh,
Politicians and their statistics, right? But I'm curious to hear this. What's he basing his argument on?
well, he quoted the Office for Budget Responsibility, saying that if we could achieve a 1% annual increase in UK productivity,
Just 1%.
yeah, that's all it would take, apparently. A measly 1% annual increase could wipe out the entire budget deficit.
Wow, if only it were that simple. Look, don't get me wrong, productivity is undeniably important for any economy. It's the engine of economic growth. But 1% annually and wiping out the whole deficit, that's, well, let's just say it's a bold claim.
Well, let's break that down because I think that's a really important point. You said productivity is the engine of economic growth. So for those of us who aren't, economics whizzes, what does that actually mean? How does a more productive nation actually translate into a healthier economy?
You got it. Basically, productivity boils down to how much we can produce. Goods, services, you name it, with the resources we have. The more we can produce with the same amount of input, think labor, capital, materials, the more efficient and prosperous our economy becomes.
Okay, so it's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. It's not just about putting in more hours, it's about being more innovative, more skilled, and making our resources stretch further.
And that leads to economic growth.
You bet. When we're more productive, businesses thrive, wages have the potential to rise, and everyone benefits from a higher standard of living. It's a win-win situation.
Sounds great in theory, but realistically, how feasible is Hunt's vision? I mean, we're hearing a lot of buzz about potential tax hikes.
Yeah, there's a lot of chatter about that, and it's not surprising. The UK, like many countries, is facing economic challenges. There's pressure to increase revenue and balance the books. So, understandably, people are looking at potential tax increases.
Especially since Hunt himself said we need to make difficult decisions. So what are we talking about here? What kind of tax hikes are on the table?
Well, there's speculation about a potential increase in capital gains tax.
That's the tax on profits from selling things like property or stocks, right?
That's the one. And then there's the inheritance tax, which is what you pay on inherited assets. That's another area where they might be considering an increase.
Right. But what's really got people talking is the possibility of pension changes.
Ah, yes, pensions. The sitting duck of government finances, as some are calling it.
A sitting duck. Why is that?
Well, think about it. The current government has pretty much ruled out increases to income tax, national insurance, VAT, all the usual suspects when it comes to raising revenue. So they're looking for alternatives, and pensions, with their various tax benefits, start to look very tempting.
So what kind of changes are we talking about? What's on the table?
There's been talk about capping the tax-free lump sum you can take from your pension at retirement.
Oh, right. I've heard about that. The Institute for Fiscal Studies suggested capping it at £100,000. That's
A significant chunk of change, yeah. And it would have a major impact on retirement planning for a lot of people.
that's putting it mildly. So it sounds like Hunt's focus on productivity is about more than just, boosting the economy. It's also about avoiding these potentially painful tax hikes.
Absolutely. If the UK can significantly increase productivity, it could create the economic growth needed to boost tax revenue without having to raise rates or make drastic changes to things like pensions.
Right. So it all comes back to this idea of productivity being the magic bullet.
The million-dollar question is, can they actually pull it off?
And it's not just about tax, is it? Hunt also waded into some other pretty complex issues, like public sector pay.
Oh, that's always a tricky one.
Tell me about it. So Hunt argued that the recent $9.4 billion increase in public sector pay is counterproductive if it's not matched by productivity improvements.
Right, so he's basically saying we can give public sector workers a raise, But if that doesn't translate into better services because of, say, increased efficiency, then what's the point? It's just going to fuel inflation.
Exactly. And we all know what inflation does to our money, right?
Right. It's like trying to run up a down escalator. You're working harder, but not really getting anywhere.
Perfect analogy. And it's not like the public sector is exactly known for its stellar productivity, is it?
Well, it's a complex issue. There are certainly areas where efficiency can be improved, but it's not always straightforward. Public services often have different goals and measures of success compared to the private sector. It's not always as simple as just producing more widgets.
True enough. But Hunt did point out that public sector productivity is currently 6% lower than pre-pandemic levels.
Yeah, that's a significant drop. And it underscores the challenge ahead.
Big time.
Uh.
Okay, so we've covered productivity, taxes, and public sector pay. Was there anything else?
Well, he also touched upon welfare reform.
Oh boy, that's always a hot button issue.
You can say that again, but it's an important part of this whole economic puzzle. And to be fair to Hunt, he acknowledged that it's probably not politically feasible to make any major changes to welfare right now.
He basically said it would be political suicide, right? Especially with an election looming.
Pretty much. He pointed to the backlash labor faced over the winter fuel allowance changes as a prime example.
Yeah, it didn't go down too well, did it?
Not at all. The optics were terrible. It looked like they were balancing the budget on the backs of pensioners.
So it sounds like Hunt is stuck between a rock and a hard place. He's pushing for productivity as the solution, but also acknowledging the political realities that make it difficult to implement some of the necessary changes.
Exactly. It's a delicate balancing act. And of course, there's no guarantee that focusing on productivity will be enough to solve the UK's economic challenges.
It's a gamble for sure.
A calculated one, perhaps. But ultimately, only time will tell if Hunt's bet on productivity pays off.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. But we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Hunt's productivity push? Do you think it's the magic bullet for the UK economy? Or are we in for a bumpy ride regardless? Let us know in the comments. And until next time, keep those brains buzzing.